guys, welcome back to the Eat Like Ruby podcast. I am back today, so excited because I'm doing an episode that is not about fat loss. Woohoo! Now, first of all, if you have a fat loss goal, don't run away right away, you little shit, because we are going to talk about something today that is applicable to any goal. Whether you're pursuing fat loss, muscle gain, performance, you're not pursuing any goal, you're just interested in nutrition, training, dieting, health, mindset, anything like that, today's episode is going to be applicable to you. And I just think this is going to be like a really cool episode. Obviously, we've just come off the back of like 2 months of fat loss chat. We're going to start getting into some other chats. We're low-key starting to look, I feel like some people are doing the whole like coming into summer, what's my goal? But a lot of people I talk to are thinking more so about like 2026 goals, which is cool because obviously if you have got like big goals to do, big phases or performance goals, events, etc., you do need to be organized. You need to be thinking about this shit. So everyone's kind of in a little bit of a different position. But I think what we're going to do today is just a good time to do this. And it's like a little bit of an assessment, if you will. Probably going to call this episode Healthy Gal Audit. So we are going to audit where we're at with our health, our nutrition, our training, our mindset, all of those things, and just see where we're at and any maybe like little red flags we've got going on or things we need to think about to actually make sure you are a healthy gal. And I've got a couple of notes today and a few things that I just want to go through to do this little healthy gal audit. But the first thing that I want to point out, I've said this literally a million times on the podcast. Like if you want to get drunk today, take a shot every time I say there is no right or wrong. If you ever want to get drunk, just listen to the podcast, take a shot every time I say there is no right or wrong. If you're a long-term listener, you'll know that I say that so often because there really isn't. And I'm going to explain that a little bit more now because I think it's a really cool thing to understand and be mindful of at all times, but especially when we're looking at this convo today. The reason I always say that and what I'm referring to today when we say like there's no right or wrong with your nutrition or training or, you know, when we use this, we're usually talking about people kind of labeling things as good or bad, right or wrong, like that's healthy, that's unhealthy, etc. And that's really what I want to look at right now. I believe to my core, and I think there's like a duality where people believe this, but then they also have beliefs that are opposing to this. And stay with me. But I believe to my core that anything can be healthy when it's approached in the right mindset. And what I mean by this is like there's so many examples we could use, but if we think about something, let's use like a meal. Let's use a meal of pizza. Let's say you've got really good nutrition habits in place and you feel great about your nutrition, like physically your health is good, mentally your mindset and everything is good. And you say to your partner, let's go out on the weekend to this pizza restaurant or this Italian restaurant that we love. And we're going to get a pizza and it's going to be like such a nice night. We love the place, good company, relaxed vibes, great food, right? You can go out and enjoy that meal so much if you're in good health and you're approaching it the right way. And that meal can genuinely feel so good for you. At the same time, if somebody has terrible nutrition habits in place and they don't feel good about them, their physical health isn't in a good position and their mental health or their mindset around food might not be in a good position either. And then they're like, oh, stuff it. I can't be bothered putting in any effort. I'll just get pizza. That can be done in such a negative way and it can have a negative impact on health if all of the other nutrition choices and all of the other choices that we're making add up in a way and everything accumulates in the way where the pizza contributes to moving us into further negative health. But then at the same time, like I said, that pizza could be so beneficial for our health if we do have good quality nutrition in place, we have good habits in place, we're feeling good, and we include that pizza into that good diet in a moderate way, in an enjoyable way, in a conscious way. And it's like a really positive choice and it's a really positive experience. And that right there is just one example. And I'm going to point out a few more in a second. But if we really look at that and we pull that apart for a second, we can't sit there and just go, pizza is bad. Going out or getting takeaway is bad. That food is bad. That food is good. Doing that is right. Doing that is wrong. Because we need the context and we need, like, it's going to be subjective to where that person's at, what they're working towards, the accumulation of everything else they're doing. And like I said, the mindset and the awareness and how conscious and in control, and whether that's like a positive or a negative thing for us personally at the time. So it's so important to understand that. If you've heard me say so many times, like, there's no good or bad, there's no right or wrong, this is why. And like I said, there's so many examples we could use for this. If we think about a person who's not exercising at all, and let's use the example or like the exercise in the form of strength training. Let's say we have a female who's not doing any strength training at all. We know strength training is so beneficial for females or for everyone's health, right? But let's say we have a female who's not strength training at all. And then they're like, you know what? I'm going to do it. I'm going to bite the bullet. I'm going to join the gym. I'm going to get a trainer or a program. I'm going to go in and I'm going to start lifting weights 3 times a week. And I'm going to do that in a way that's really structured. It's a good quality program. I know what I'm doing. I get my technique checks. Like, this is going to be very good for my physical health. And mentally and emotionally, I'm feeling really positive about this. I'm stoked with myself for including this habit, bringing in this habit, introducing this thing into my life. It's really positively contributing to my physical and mental health, right? At the same time, if we have a person who is obsessive with training, does not let themselves have any days off, if they're sick, they still go to the gym, if they're not feeling it, they still go to the gym, like someone who just has gotten to a negative, obsessive place where they are smashing themselves in the gym, that can be really detrimental to health. So if we look at that right there, we couldn't just go, oh, gym training is so good for you. Gym training can be so good for you. I want to make that so clear. If we think about that first example I just said, that thing can be so good for somebody. But at the same time, it can be, quote, bad for someone or detrimental to someone and their health if it's being used and abused in the wrong way, or if it's being approached and thought about in the wrong way, or in a way that's negatively impacting the health. If we think about someone who is really obsessive with training, usually they're quite intense, they're putting quite hectic pressure on themselves, and it is quite a negative experience. We can just look at that right there. Like, obviously we can pull these things apart and really look at them deeper. But even if we just look at them on the surface, if you've got one person who's made this conscious, positive choice to start introducing strength training, and they do it in a positive, structured, mindful way that's feeling really good for them, versus somebody who's doing it in that hectic, obsessive, intense way for themselves, and it's not feeling good. And usually that's like quite subconscious, like they might not admit that it's not feeling good, but if we pull it apart, we can see what's going on there. If we look at that, again, we couldn't just go like, oh, gym training is so good. Anyone who does gym training is in good health. Everyone should be doing this. Everyone should do it X amount of times a week. Even if we say things like, doing more exercise is better. Well, if someone's only training once a week, yes, doing more exercise might be better for that person. If someone's smashing themselves with 12 sessions a week, we can't go, doing more exercise is better. It's like, bro, no, this person would benefit from doing less. And again, that comes right back to our number one saying of there's no right or wrong. We can't say it's right to train more because there are people that would benefit from training less. But we can't then just go, oh, it's right for everyone to train less because there's people that would benefit from training more. Even if we come back to that pizza example, we can't just go, oh, it's wrong to go out for a meal. Pizza is a, quote, bad food. If that food, first of all, if you think that, you need to go back and listen to all of the podcast episodes we've done about flexible dieting and the fact that we can truly include all foods in moderation, whether we're working towards body composition goals, health goals, performance goals. We can actually tangibly include pizza in the diet and still move in the direction we want to go, but we can also include it in a positive way for our mental health and our social health, our relationships, our mindset, our enjoyment of life. Like the list goes on. So we can't just go, oh, that thing is, quote, so bad for someone. Because if a person's feeling really good, they are in good physical health, they're including heaps of nutrients, they've got great habits in place, and they enjoy a pizza once a week with their partner or their best mate or their mum, and they feel great about that. How the hell could we sit there and go, pizza's so bad for you? I'm pausing to let that one sink in. And what I think can happen here, like even if we use a few more examples, I've said in some of our recent episodes, it's really cool to think about how you would want your loved ones to approach things like this, because I think it's actually so common for people to have a bit of a different standard for their loved ones compared to themselves. And often we haven't even really thought about this and pieced it together. Unless you've listened to the last 2 months of podcasts, you would have heard me go hard on this. But I think it's a cool thing to do here, because If we use an example, and I just want to preface, like I don't touch on this stuff lightly. I know this stuff can be quite intense for some people, but let's say you had a best mate or a sister or a daughter or even your mum. Let's say you had a female in your life who was quite underweight or just not looking after themselves, maybe very restrictive nutrition, always dieting, and you were just like a little bit worried about this person. Imagine you've just got that person and you're like, oh, I wish they would just look after themselves a bit more with eating a bit more, fueling a bit more, gaining a little bit of weight, anything like that, right? If you saw that person go out and enjoy a pizza in that scenario that we just said before, if they genuinely went out and had a great time and enjoyed some pizza, you would be like, that's unreal. I'm so stoked that person did that. And the underlying thing is that is so good for them. That is what they needed. Maybe for their physical health, definitely for their mental health and their mindset and all those things we keep rattling off. That pizza or whatever meal like that could be so good for a person in that scenario. And I think it's so common, like I said, to believe that about other people. But then if you've had yourself on a restrictive diet for a really long time and then you go out for a pizza, you're like, oh my God, that was so bad. I shouldn't do that. That was wrong. Right? Think about that right there. If you have someone in your life who you think has a lot of restriction around their food and you wished that they would like nourish themselves a little bit more, I guess is a good way to look at it. Yet you've had a lot of restriction around your food. And then anytime you go out and nourish yourself, you see it as a bad thing. Really clock that. Why is it good for them, but it's bad for you? And I just want to point out, obviously, if you are a regular listener or you understand a lot about nutrition and training, you might have protocols in place right now that it's like, no, it just doesn't make sense for me to go out and eat pizza too often. Maybe I am pursuing fat loss and I've got certain nutrition protocols in place and pizza doesn't slot in too well to those. I'll enjoy the pizza later, right? But again, that just backs up our point. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it can be good, other times it can be bad. But again, that just backs up the point. We can't just have it black and white, like it's always good or it's always bad. It's going to be relative to the situation, the individual, the goals, the other foods consumed, the mindset the person's in, the things they're working towards, what their week has looked like, what their day has looked like. The list goes on. So it's not just black and white. Some things are good, some things are bad. There is so much context around these things to then decide if they are going to positively contribute or possibly negatively contribute to a person's health status, physical and mental, at that time, depending on who they are and what they're going through and what all of that looks like. And if we kind of segue into the next point I had, it sort of relates to this one, so it's going to flow in really nicely. But I think it's a really cool thing to do, and I guess this is where our Healthy Gal audit is kind of going to start. I think it's really cool to think about the things that you're doing, like the things you're personally doing, and really clock whether you do these things in a positive, healthy way or not. Because like we've just given with those examples, we can have certain habits or protocols or things in place that we think are like typically healthy. But I think it's really important to pull it apart and go, am I doing it in a healthy way? And some examples I want to give of this are, I'm going to use myself as a perfect example. I've spoken on the podcast before about how I love caffeine. I absolutely love caffeine. Low-key addicted to caffeine, right? But that right there is what I want to talk about. I can have phases. Like I love getting a takeaway skinny mocha. If you know, you know. I love sweet things. I love coffee. The skinny mocha is just the dream to me, right? But there are times where I can wake up, let's say I wake up on a Saturday and like I live on the sunny coast, so it's a beautiful place, and I think, oh yeah, I'm going to go get my favorite takeaway skinny mocha. I'm going to go down to the boardwalk. I'm going to do a walk. I'm going to listen to a podcast. That's going to be so nice, right? Then there are other times where I can wake up and go, if I don't get a coffee in the next 5 seconds, I'm going to scream. Right? And caffeine addicts, if you know, you know. But honestly, that's such an important thing to think about, because in the both of those scenarios, the physical habit or the thing you're doing is the same. But in one scenario, it can be so positive and it can contribute to your physical health or your mental health or both in such a positive way. And then in the other scenario, it can be quite negative. If we really think about that example, if I go get my favorite coffee, I go for a walk, I listen to a podcast, I get some good steps, I get fresh air, it's me time, it's relaxing, like it's all of these things we're trying to do for ourselves. That's so like nourishing. Like I said before, it's quite a loving thing. It's a positive thing. Like I'm doing something nice for myself and it's really enjoyable. If I wake up and just go, someone give me a coffee or I'm going to scream, that's not very positive. That's not very good for my health. That's quite a red flag. And I think we can do this with so many things. It's even like, I think steps is another really good example that we could almost tie back to the examples I said before, but we can think about it here as well. If you're someone who's getting sweet F all steps and you go, you know what, I'm going to start putting in effort. Maybe you're getting 4,000 steps a day and you're like, okay, I'm going to start putting in effort to get 7,000 steps a day. And I'm going to do that by going for a walk in the morning or going for a walk after work. It's going to be really nice, really positive thing for my physical health and I'm feeling good about it, right? So that kind of ties back to that first point we said. And if we compare it to, or we like look at it from this current point of view that we're looking at, again, if you wake up and you're like, oh, it would actually be really good for me today to go out. Maybe I get my coffee, maybe I don't. We're looking at steps now. Get over the coffee roofs. But if you wake up and go, yeah, it's a really positive thing for me to go for a morning walk, go down to the beach and get some extra steps today, etc. Versus someone who is like, obsessive with steps. I have to get steps. I'm doing laps of my house. I'm grinding. I'm constantly pushing more. Again, in both of these scenarios, the person is working towards getting more steps. In one scenario, we're doing it in a really positive way. In the other scenario, it's quite negative and it's having quite a negative impact on our mindset and our mental health day to day. And I'd say overall, it negatively contributes to our health. If we want to look at like our health journey, even if we think about this, a little bit of a side note, but she's back, guys, in her chatty episodes with her side notes. A little bit of a side note here is most people go into nutrition and training and steps and health and all of these things to improve their health. Like that's usually what sparks this is like, I'm getting more into these things to improve my health. And for a lot of people, somewhere along the way, we actually start to move away from good health because we're quite fixated on a lot of these things. If you're somebody who originally became conscious of your steps because you're like, oh, that's really good for me to monitor those and make sure I get enough, maybe get a little bit more, that's awesome. If over time that has become an obsession with getting more steps and I need to get more, and if I'm getting 12, then 13,000 would even be better, and then 14,000 would even be better, and it becomes this grind. And then we want to look back and go, I originally got into this thing to improve my health. I, on the surface, probably tell myself and maybe tell other people or whatever that I do these things for my health. Strip it back. Is it feeling that healthy? Physically, is it feeling healthy? Maybe you're just cooked and you're run down because you're smashing out all these things. Or mentally, I think is a bigger one. Do I actually really feel good about this thing? Do I feel like this is positively contributing to my life? Because our health journey is a choice. Like we can choose what we implement and how we set up our health journey. So it can be common, like I'm saying, to start that process positively and pick the things you want to do, pick the sport you want to do or the gym or the diet or whatever. But then over time, kind of back yourself into this corner of like, I have to do this thing. And this is where our Healthy Gal audit comes in. I think you want to stop and go, is this actually still healthy for me? Or have I just become used to doing this thing? Like, is it just such a habit? And again, we view habits usually as being a healthy thing, but is this such a habit that I'm actually just addicted to it in a bit of a negative way and I'm not really stopping to assess like, hey, should I adjust this? Has it become negative? Is it still serving me? I'm just so used to doing it that I just smash myself to do it every day and I haven't stopped to assess it for a while. Or maybe you've never stopped to assess it because you haven't really stopped to think about it this way. Again, if we look at kind of like surface level content and advice and shit that comes out around health, it's always like, you should go to gym. You should eat healthy. You should do more steps. It's like, no effing shit, Einstein. Literally tell us something we don't know. I'm going to tell people something they don't know right now, which is what I always try and do on the podcast. But if we just look at that surface level content, it's easy to then adopt those things, and then do them all the time and then be like, well, that's what everyone's saying you should be doing for health. And I'm doing those things. So life's good. But the next step is having the awareness and going, but to what extent are they healthy for me? And what mindset am I approaching them in? Is this actually positively contributing to my health? Or am I just ticking this box because it's thrown down my throat every day from the internet that this is something that I should work towards? And I've become obsessed with working towards it, or I'm just so used to working towards it. But when I stop and think about it, I'm actually not enjoying it anymore. It's quite negative. It's quite hectic. And I really need to assess whether it's actually, quote, good for me just because the internet or random wannabe coaches, if they want to call themselves that, are saying like, everyone should get more steps, everyone should do this, everyone should do that. You got to stop and have the education. This is why I love education so much, because I want people to understand all this stuff to then be able to come back to themselves and go, how is this applying to me? How is this working for me? What is this looking like for me? Is this actually healthy for me? And if we move on to our next point, this is something that we've kind of covered on the podcast throughout our fat loss series, and we've covered it a lot, but I just feel like it is so necessary to look at this again right now. And if you're someone who's heard me talk about this before and you kind of have selective hearing about what you want to take in from me and the podcast, etc., really, really stop and clock that as we get into this one, because one of the most common things I'm seeing at the moment is people saying things to me like, oh my God, I love the podcast, Rubes. I love everything you say. I feel like you're speaking directly to me. But then when we look at the habits of these people, when they start talking to me about their habits, it's like you're conveniently hand-picking the things that you actually apply. And obviously everything we talk about is not going to apply to every individual, but as we get into this next one, people are going to understand what I'm talking about. And I think it's just very, very important to clock this one, stop for a second and go, am I doing this? Is this me? And what I'm talking about right now is if we think about all of the convos we've had on the podcast over the last few months, we have spoken so much about how we can achieve fat loss through going into an energy deficit, but we do not want to spend prolonged time in an energy deficit, or we don't want to go into too low of a deficit, do things too aggressively, etc. And especially when there isn't a big fat loss goal. And this next thing that I'm going to talk about is so common. I see this so much with people who have a small fat loss goal and then they end up in this position. And what I'm talking about is someone who would call themselves, and this is where you've got to stop and ask yourself if you're doing this, someone who would call themselves a health conscious person and claim that they do things for their health. I do things for my health. I'm a health conscious person. And usually it's like, I'm into gym, I'm into nutrition, I stick to my diet, I meal prep, I do any or all of those things. But usually we've got a bit of a story. Maybe we tell other people or we're just telling it to ourselves. But really the underlying thing there is like, I'm a health conscious person and I do these things for my health. If we think about all the convos we've had about the fact that we do not want to spend prolonged time on low calories and in a low calorie diet, in an energy deficit, etc. If you're someone who does not have a large fat loss goal or does not need to lose a large amount of body fat, and I see this hugely with people who are like in the 60 kilo range, give or take, and it's like, oh, I'm in the high 60s and I want to be 62, or I'm 64 kilos and I want to be 60. First of all, this is like the reason I tell people not to fixate on scale weight. And that right there is a perfect example of someone who handpicks shit that they want to take on board from the podcast, because we have had so many combos about how we shouldn't just look at scale weight. And the amount of people that come to me and go, oh my God, Rubes, I love the podcast. I love this. I love that, and I've lost X amount of weight. I'm like, bro, tell me something better. Tell me something better than how much weight you've lost. Tell me how you eat more nutrients now. Tell me how you know about energy availability now. Tell me about the fact that you're actually mindful of things like calcium and iron in your diet. You're actually having flexible dieting. You've improved your mindset. You've started resistance training. Tell me something better than how much weight you've lost, because I've told you a million times, weight does not matter. So that is such a perfect example of someone who's like, I love everything you say, but I'm still going to fixate on my weight. I'm not going to take that bit on board. Right? And that's off topic. That's a side note, but that is so true. I see that on a daily basis. But if we come back to people who are in that position where in their mind, they're like, I just want to lose a couple of kilos. I just want to go from high 60s to low 60s, or from low 60s to under 50, or anywhere around that mark where, like I said, you don't have a big weight loss goal. You don't need to pursue a big amount of weight loss. but you've had yourself on low calories for ages. Like I said before, you're claiming that you care about your health. I'm a health conscious person. I do all these things for my health. Yet we've had so many conversations about the fact that things that are good for people's health is spending time actually giving the body enough energy, consuming enough nutrients, thinking about energy availability. All of these things that we've been harping on about for ages. Again, people apparently, quote, love to hear them, but don't love to implement them. And then we need to come back to this question of like, do you claim that you are a healthy person and you do things for your health, yet you've spent unnecessarily long amount of time on low calories purely to achieve fat loss or weight loss? And if we keep pulling that apart for someone actually assessing how healthy that is, usually when we're on low calories, it's hard to fit in certain nutrients into our day. So I would ask straight away, right? If you've been in a calorie deficit or on low calories for a while, are you consuming the recommended daily intake of protein, fruit, veggies, fiber, whole grains, calcium, iron, omega-3s every day? Every day, right? And I understand that when we're on low calories, it can be hard to do that. But this is my point, right? When we have low calories in place, it can be hard to tick all those boxes and still make it work within our calories. So when we have a fat loss goal or when we go onto low calories, we have to really be strategic with those things. And sometimes they do fall a little bit short, right? But stay with me because this comes back to the point. If you are falling short on those things, yet you have kept yourself on a low calorie diet for a really long time, you are choosing to pursue low calories, fat loss and weight loss over your health. Come back to the fact that you're out here going, I'm a health conscious person and I do these things for my health. Yet I am choosing to sacrifice things that will benefit my health so I can have more fat loss or weight loss. And sometimes this is a duality of it. This segues right back to that first thing of there's no right or wrong. It's not black or white. There are people whose health would benefit from going into a deficit. If we think about someone who's carrying excess amounts of body fat that it's negatively impacting their health, they go into a calorie deficit, they start to remove some of that body fat. It's literally like less visceral fat around their organs. It's less stress on their joints. They're in better cardiovascular health. They have better digestion, better metabolic health. Like losing body fat can be beneficial for health for some people. Consistently hanging around on low calories and missing out on essential daily nutrients is not healthy. And if you have chosen to do that for a really long time, and a really cool thing to think about here is we see this so much where people do a deficit through like Jan, Feb, March, maybe April. They come out of that deficit. They F about through the winter. They don't really do too well at maintenance or whatever. They just kind of faff about. And then they go back to their deficit August, September, October, November. We're now looking at a person who has a small fat loss goal, but has spent 3/4 of the year in an energy deficit. And when they're in that energy deficit, they're missing out on nutrients. And that's just one part of it. You're also falling into that state of low energy availability. We've spoken about that a lot, where there's a low amount of energy available in your body to function well. So things like your metabolic health, digestive health, hormone function, immune system, brain function, organ function, all these things we've rattled off so many times, those things get negatively affected when we fall into a state of low energy availability. We fall into a state of low energy availability when we've had a calorie deficit in place for too long or for a long time in a body that does not need to have a calorie deficit in place for a long time. And again, if we bring it back to the convo we're having here and doing our Healthy Gal audit, is this actually healthy for you? And are you claiming to be a health conscious person, yet you're making choices daily that don't support your health? And this can be one where like you've heard me say it a few times and you've turned a blind eye because you don't want to admit it, or it could be one that you've never really pieced together and you're sitting there now thinking, because what can happen is like most of us spend our whole life forming a connection of health and fat loss and weight loss, like they're one and the same. Because if we think about like magazines and media and all the shit that's thrown down our throats for years when we're growing up as females, it's like, improve your health, lose 5 kilos, go on a diet. This is good for your health. Things are pretty much like if it's healthy, it's fat loss, it's weight loss, etc., or it's not, right? So it can be common to have this subconscious or really deep underlying connection of being on a diet means I'm healthy, right? Anytime I'm on my diet, I'm doing that for my health. That is good for me. That is good for my health, etc. Like that's the narrative that's usually sitting there for a lot of people. But the more we start to understand this stuff, and I think what can happen here is like we've got a big history of viewing things the way I just said. Then we start to understand this stuff that we're talking about here. And then you start to be like, yeah, shit, okay, I've never thought about it like that. And then this almost ties back to what we said before. You start to understand this stuff and you love seeing other people implement it. You love seeing your friends go onto higher calories. People love seeing me. If I say like, I'm going onto higher calories, I'm going to pursue muscle gain, I'm going to optimize my energy availability, I eat X amount of nutrients every day. People are like, hell yes, Rubes, that's awesome. You're putting out such a good message. It's so good to see that. I love seeing females do this. Again, think about the fact if like your daughter wanted to start eating more and was like mindful of eating more nutrients. If your mum was like, I'm going to start eating more, I'm going to start thinking about getting more nutrients every day. I'm not going to care how much I weigh, right? If we see anyone else do this, we applaud it. Yet we do not have that same view and same opinion for ourselves. And usually we haven't pieced all this together. So you could be sitting there right now piecing all that together going, yeah, I do claim to be a healthy person and my intentions are good. I just want to say, guys, after attacking people for the last half hour, I can acknowledge when the intention is good. Like you're getting up, you're going to gym, you're meal prep and you're doing all these things. You're putting in the effort and you have good intention. I will always applaud that. But we have to really piece this together and go, yes, my intention is good and my effort is good, but I am not truly prioritizing my health. I'm prioritizing my body composition, my weight, my aesthetic goals. And we can prioritize those at times, but we cannot confuse that with prioritizing our health because they are not always one and the same. And you need to stop and do an audit for yourself and go, am I claiming, maybe to other people, maybe to myself, that I'm doing these things for my health, yet knowing everything that I know now and everything that Rubes has explained to me over the last few months and years, I understand that it probably is detrimental to my health to restrict my energy for a long time. And I've said this on the podcast before, we wouldn't restrict anyone else's energy for a long time. You wouldn't put your kids on a diet for ages if they weren't overweight. Right? You wouldn't put your mum on a diet for ages if she wasn't overweight. You wouldn't tell your best mate to go on a diet if she doesn't need to. Yet, we hold ourselves in that position for a really long time. And then because of all of this history and this connection we have with fat loss and weight loss being associated with health, we then start to form these stories of like, I do this for my health. But we need to stop and intercept it and go, is it that healthy? Again, knowing what I know now, is my physical health actually being nourished and being supported here? Is my mental health, if we think back to the points we made at the start of the episode, are you doing things in a really intense, negative, restrictive, obsessive way that originally you put those things in place for your health, but now they've started to become the total opposite? And I've got two more things that I want to talk about, or two more points that I want to talk about, but they really do just fall off the back of this one. I think it is so important if you're doing your Healthy Gal audit and you're picking up what I'm putting down right now to ask yourself, do I only put effort into these things when there is the hope or the promise, I guess you would say, of fat loss in return? Do I only put effort into my nutrition, training, etc., when there is the hope or the expectation of fat loss in return? And there's so many things coming to my mind here. I'm trying to keep on track and not go forever. But I've said this on the podcast before, but it's worth saying again. And this is kind of like a thing you can do a little audit. Again, that's why we're here. Do this audit for yourself and go, oh yeah, shit, do I fall into this mindset and this mentality? And what I'm talking about with this first one is, if you put in your effort and your energy to like your meal prep and you're counting your calories and your training, whatever you've got in place for your nutrition and training at the moment, if you put energy and effort into that for the week and you do not see progress with a fat loss or weight loss goal, do you fall into the mentality of like, oh my God, I put in all this effort and I didn't even get a result? Or poor me. Or it can even be like, I'm such a hero, I'm such a martyr. Like, oh my God, I kept going even though the scale didn't move. Like you deserve a friggin' medal for putting energy and effort into your health even though the scale didn't move. shouldn't we just want to put energy and effort into our health for no other reason than we want to be healthy? And again, this comes back to the question of like, are you doing it for your health? Because if you feel like you're either a victim or a hero for putting energy and effort into your health, your nutrition, your training, even though you didn't get fat loss or weight loss this week, you then have to intercept that and go, so what am I doing it for then? Am I really doing it for my health? Because if I was, I would still feel like this was a really good week and this was successful and I would be happy with the week. If you're not happy, and I've seen this a lot, if you're not happy with the week because the scale didn't move or my measurements didn't go down or anything like that, come back over here and go, but shouldn't I just be happy that I had a good week of looking after myself? If you're not, that's a red flag that you're probably not doing it for your health, or your health isn't the priority. And I've said this on the podcast before, but it's perfect time to bring it back up and think about it here. If you fall into the opposite position, let's say you have a week where you aren't on your game with your nutrition training, like you don't stick to your calories or you don't get your meal prep done, or you're just not happy with your habits, right? Think about going into a week where you wanted to implement certain protocols or certain habits, and for whatever reason that didn't happen. So you're not too stoked on yourself for that. But then you hop on the scale or you take your measurements and you see those things move in the direction that you want them to go. Do you then go, oh, well, it actually was a good week? I'm pausing for effect. If you have a week where you do not look after yourself and you do not implement the standard of habits and protocols that you want to have in place for your health, but the scale and or your measurements go down, is it actually a good week? Should we be declaring that a quote good week just because the scale went down? And again, think about how you would feel if other people were doing that. If someone else said to you, like, I didn't look after myself this week, but it was fine because I lost weight. I'm pausing so I can wave my little red flag. That is a red flag, and we really need to intercept that. And again, this isn't shit that we think about. But again, guys, I said, I'm going to tell you something you don't know. Everyone's out here just being like, oh my God, it's summer, you should lock in. No shit, Sherlock, tell us something we don't know. Here is something we don't know. Are we getting on the scale and making that the deciding factor of whether our week was good or not? And are we then claiming to be a person who cares about our health, even though literally whether or not the scale went down is what we're using as the scorecard to decide whether the week was good? If health was the priority, that wouldn't be the measurement. Like that wouldn't be the form of assessment that we're using to decide whether we're in good health. Especially if you weren't happy with the things that you had done for the week with your habits and your nutrition and your training and your health. And I've got one more note, but it's just continuing on with this current rant. I'm going to read out the actual note that I had. I've just been jotting these notes down in my phone, and I'm going to read this one out. This is what it says. I put lots of effort into my health and myself, ... Do you only do this when there's the hope of fat loss in return, ... Would you go to maintenance for the next 6 months, even if you want more fat loss? And if not, piece everything together. Are you doing things for your health or just for your weight/aesthetic? So if we really think about that, let's say you are a person who's in that position, like I said before, where you've always been, or like for a long time, you've been like, I just want to lose those couple more kilos. I just want to lean up that little bit more, right? If you've been doing that for a really long time and you've had a deficit and or sloppy nutrition, because that's usually what's happening here. We spend a few months in a deficit. We then spend a few months just being random and sloppy with our nutrition. We then go back to the deficit. If we look at a window like that, at no point was health the priority. If your dieting history for the last 8 to 12 months is like deficit, shitty sloppy habits, deficit again, at what point were you prioritizing health? That wasn't even my point, but it was just worth making it right there. But if that is what your dieting history has looked like for the last few months, and you're a person who claims to care about their health, think about everything we've just said and the fact that your body would probably love a period of getting enough energy. You have restricted the amount of energy you've given your body for a really long time. If you've had a deficit in place for a large part of the last 12 months, you have restricted the amount of energy you've given your body during that time, right? If your body does not need intense energy restriction because you do not have a large fat loss goal, your body would probably love going into a period where you actually give it the energy that it needs, you give it the nutrients that it needs, it can thrive in terms of recovery, immune system, hormone function, digestive function, brain fog, mood, sleep, libido, training performance, recovery, all these things we're constantly rattling off. These things need energy to survive and to thrive, right? And that is health. That is health. If those things are functioning well, that is good health, right? So if you've had your body in a position for a long time where you haven't given it the energy towards those things, yet you're claiming to be a health conscious person, come back to this question I had here. Would you go to maintenance for the next 6 months, even if you want more fat loss? Most people are like, no, because I just want to get those last couple of kilos off. But I'm doing it for my health. Okay, I'm telling you right now, your health would benefit if you came out of your deficit for the next 6 months. Funny how you don't want to do that, yet you're apparently doing things for your health. And guys, I'm going to say it one more time. There's people this applies to and there's people that it does not. If you're in a position, let's just say, for example, you started your fat loss journey at 95 kilos and you're working down towards like 75 kilos. For example, if you've come down and you're now in the 80s and you're heading towards the 70s and you're ticking boxes and you've got good habits in place and it's feeling good, that's awesome. You might actually benefit from staying in the deficit. Like I said before, there are people whose health will benefit from going into a calorie deficit. But this is where we need to do our audit and go in and think about all of this for ourselves. And so when we're looking at this question of like, would you go to maintenance? There are people who's like, no, it actually wouldn't make that much sense for me to go to maintenance. Like these people can do diet breaks, they can go to maintenance if they want to, but it would actually support their health to continue pursuing fat loss and get to a healthy weight range and a healthy body fat level. If you're already in a healthy weight range and a healthy body fat level, yet you want to push a little bit more purely for aesthetic body composition reasons, again, this is not wrong. I've helped people do this for years. I've done this for myself over the years. But if you have been doing that for a really long time, this is where we come back to the question of, is it still healthy? And if you think that you're doing things for your health, you got to pull all this apart, piece it back together and go, okay, cool. I don't need to be in a deficit for my health. So I'm in a deficit right now for aesthetic, for body composition reasons, right? If I've done that for a really long time, AKA the last 12 months, most of it has been spent in a deficit. If I then think about the fact that my body and the size and the weight and everything that I am doesn't need a deficit, it actually needs a bit more love. It needs a bit more nourishment, nutrients, energy. Yet I haven't prioritized that at all in the last year. Again, is what I'm doing right now actually in support of my health and in service of my health? And I feel like I need to start wrapping this episode up, guys, but I also feel like there's so much more to say about this topic because this has been so prominent in the work that I've done in the last few months and especially just in the last few weeks is just having people come to me that are just so, I want to say obsessed, like it's not obsessive, but just obsessed with getting that bit more fat loss. And I think there's just so many convos and so many things to look at here because I think people are just so like used to that or so fixated on that. And I'll be totally honest, like I go into two minds where we then do all these episodes about fat loss and I'm like, are we contributing to the problem? Like we're speaking about fat loss so much. Are we encouraging people who don't need fat loss to get after it? And then you've got this duality of people who do need fat loss coming to you and going like, oh my God, I've tried everything for years and you've finally been the person that's helped me. So then I'm like, oh, we should keep doing this and we should keep helping those people. But that's why I always then will come back to conversations like this, because if we're going to spend weeks and months talking about fat loss, yet then we look at people, it's like, you don't need fat loss. We need to then also have conversations like this so people can have all the facts and all the information and actually do the audit and do the assessment for themselves and go, yes, it's cool to learn about fat loss from Rubes and I can go back to that goal if I want to or need to at a later date. Like I've said, I'm all for people working towards body composition goals at different times. But if you have just been on this fat loss grind for such a long time and you don't need to. And like I said, I'm going to do more episodes about this because I have a lot more to say, but so many common things we see with people that have been on low calories is they also then start to be like, oh, my gut health is shitty, my hormones are shitty, my iron levels are shitty. The amount of people I see on low calories thinking maybe my hormones are a bit messed up and my iron levels are shit. It's like, yeah, because you're underfueling and you've been underfueling for such a long time. And so that's why we need to bring forward conversations like this, because everyone's in such a different position. We can't just have this one conversation. And I guess this does summarize the convo and it does tie things up, because this is why we can't just say certain things are good and other things are bad and this is right and this is wrong, because everyone is going to benefit from implementing different things depending on where you're at, what you've been through, what the last 12 months have looked like, what your health status looks like physically, how are you, mentally, how are you, how is all of this piecing together? And I just think it's important, if you take nothing else from this episode, take on board and really clock with yourself, do I only hear what I want to hear from the podcast and from the health and fitness space in general? Because like I said, I think people love the podcast and they love the info, but then they handpick the things that they want to apply. Like, oh, she talks about all of these things, but she also talks about eating chocolate and pursuing fat loss. I'm just going to do that. How convenient. So have a think, have a re-listen if you need to. I feel like it's going to be one of those episodes where people are like, I hate you, Ruby. And then they listen to it again and they're like, yeah, okay, you had a point. Right? Like I've said all along, guys, I'm happy being the bad guy if it actually pulls people forward and supports people's health and their growth and their progress physically and mentally. I'll be the bad guy. You can bash me a little bit today if you want, but if you do me a deal, if you're going to be like, I hate you, Rubes, today, promise me when you calm down, you'll come back and listen to the episode again and do the assessment and see if there's anything that you personally need to take from it and adjust a little bit with your nutrition, training, mindset, health, etc. So that is all for me today. I'm going to be back on Wednesday, and on Wednesday I'm going to do an episode about my own nutrition at the moment and what I'm working towards, and it is going to be very unexpected. I think a lot of people are going to hear this and be like, what? Is she really doing that? Yes, she is. So stay tuned. I'm going to talk all about that on Wednesday, but that is all for me today, guys. Thank you so much. I will be back then.
The Eat Like Ruby podcast is not a substitute for professional medical or dietary advice. The advice given in this episode is general in nature and should not be used to treat any medical conditions, health conditions, illnesses, injuries, and/or any nutrition-related conditions, deficiencies, or similar. This podcast is not to be used as or in place of medical advice or dietary advice. Please consult your healthcare professional before implementing any of the advice, information, or protocols discussed in this episode.